Imagine you need to set up infrastructure that can support multiple applications and multiple environments efficiently while maintaining enterprise standard and security. Hello everyone, welcome to Let's DevOps. My name is Sumit, and today we will be building a powerful Bicep framework that can make this possible. For this tutorial, I'll be following this article. You can find the link in the video description. So before getting into the solution, let's try to understand what problem we want to solve. So if you see here, first, we need to make sure that we can deploy identical infrastructure across multiple environments, right? That's our first goal. The second is we need to maintain a environment specific configuration without the code duplication. So we need to make sure that we are not duplicating any code. And also we need to implement the proper gate approval for the production deployment. Apart from that, with respect to supporting multiple applications, we need to make sure that we build a framework that can help to easy scale to a different application. And also we need to follow the enterprise naming convention because it's very important and it is very mandatory in the enterprise level solutions. So let's also understand why we want to solve this, because we also have some traditional approach where we were mostly trying to copy paste some of the infrastructure template from one environment to another environment. That leads to configuration drift, maintenance nightmare, that also brings the security gap and deployment errors. So these are some of the problems that we had, and we wanted to build a solution that can cover all of them. So now coming to the solution. So we wanted to build a modular bicep framework. The solution what we have is we need to create a modular bicep plus pipeline framework. Let's get into the detail. Now if you see here, we have three sections. One is module, second is application, and third is the pipeline. In the module, we try to define all the infrastructure as a code related services. Like if you want to build or create a function app, then the common function app code will be sitting in the module, similar to the VNet, NSG, and logging. I have just defined some of them, but again, in your case, based on your need, you need to first define whatever the resource that you're going to create that needs to be defined in the module section. Then comes to the application. So right now you have application X, and under the application X, we need to define this 4 environment. Like now, this is 4. If you, in your case, if it is 3 needed or 5 needed or 6 needed, based on those, you just create a folder. Definitely, I'll show you also in Azure Repo. But the idea is, right now you have application X, and then you just create 4 different environments because it's what you want. And you are just making use of the module that is created. Maybe tomorrow somebody else came or some different application that we need to create. In this case, we are just adding another application called application Y folder. We are not creating modules because it's already been created. And the third section we have is pipeline. So in the pipeline, we set up in such a way that it will pick the application and it will deploy to the right environment from the right folder. Now let's go to the repo and I'll show you what I have in a demo. So here I have the bicep framework that I've created, and I'll just show you how it has been grouped. Now, first you see in this infrastructure folder, I have 3 different folders. One is application, second is the module, and third is the pipeline. So in the application X, we will define what are the resources that we need to create for the application. And under the modules, we define the common resources that we wanted to create. Like in Azure, you have a function app, you have logs, you have APIM, you have a storage account and all. And under the pipeline, we will define how those application will be get created or deployed to the Azure infrastructure. Okay, let's get into the application X. And this framework that we have defined, definitely it is for Bicep, but if you are using also Terraform, you can also follow along. Definitely there will be some syntax differences, but overall this framework also can be used for Terraform as well. And assume that if you are new to Bicep, you can follow my other video, which the link of the video I will put in the video description. Okay, now coming to the dev. So if you see here in the dev, we have a main.bicep and then the parameter.json. For production, for other environment, everything is same, right? So all of them has main.bicep and then parameter.json file. In the main.bicep, we define what are the resources that needs to be created for this application. So let's take an example. If you see here, I am deploying the virtual network. Then I'm creating a network security group. Then I'm deploying the function app. That's all. So for my application, this is what it's needed. But in your case, it might be differ. So assume that you need to first define what are the resources that you need to create. And then you need to update your main.bicep accordingly. But the whole idea is in this main.bicep of dev, we are calling the module, right? We are not just putting the code of the VNet to create. We are just calling the module and we are passing the right parameters. And the parameters value we are also putting in the parameter.json. So anything specific to the dev, that will go in the dev parameter.json file. Similarly for production, yes, you need to define what are the resources that you need to create while calling the module. And then you have a parameter.json that you want to use it. Because definitely for dev, the parameter, the value can be different. Like assume that if you have a function app and you are deploying on a dev in a standard SKU, but in a production it will be a premium. And that I will also show you here. So let's take an example. In function app in the dev, I am using the SKU y1, but maybe in the parameter for production, it can be different. Maybe I've just used EP2. In your case, based on your need, you just need to update that. Okay. Now coming to the module. In the module, you see all of the resources that you will create in Azure. You define here. You have defined APIM, function app, NSG, and based on your need, you need to define that in your application X. Okay. Now coming to the pipeline. In the pipeline, we have two different files. One is master pipeline, where you are defining all of the different stages we have, like dev, test, staging, and production, and which is calling the template bicep. So this is what it is deploying. So it's mainly going to environment folder, right, for application, and then it is calling the main.bicep file with the parameter, because that value doesn't change, right? So the name doesn't change. Now assume that if you have we set it up this pipeline for application X, tomorrow you need another application like application Y, then in this case you need to update this template, or you just create another template for maybe application Y, right? So just you need to create another one, and then in the master pipeline you need to create another. So that is also better. So for each application you try to follow this combination, one master and one is the template. Okay. So now coming back to the blog. So now you hope this whole bicep framework, right? You see this is the structure which I also explained in Azure DevOps, and don't worry, I will push the code to the GitHub so that you can use it, right? That the link also I will put in the video description. So yeah, now building the modular bicep framework. Yes, we broke down in the 3 core reusable modules, like in our case, because we wanted to have a virtual network security, and the function app, and then we called through the application X, dev, staging, dev, and production. Okay. Now to support multi-environment, yes, you see in the application X, we created 4 different folders, right? And that is to deploy those 4 environment. right? And then like assume that you just need a 2 or 3 environment, you just need to create 3 different folder, and then you can just follow the way we are creating main.bicep and then parameters.json file. And environment specific configuration, again you can put it in the parameter.json, like for dev maybe specific value, so you can put it in a dev parameter.json file. Okay, now coming to the building the deployment pipeline. So definitely we created 4 different stages. So there is a dev, test, stage, and production, but you should not supposed to deploy directly to production. So you can always add a approval gate to the production deployment. And there is also some key feature we implemented, like if you see here, definitely for dev we have the main.bicep, parameter.json, and the module which is being used, and then we have a CI/CD pipeline. And on the dev deployment, on the dev environment, we have a feature, develop, and main branch. So with all 3 type of branches you can deploy, but on the test you can only deploy from the develop and the main branch. And for the stage, yes, only from main, and the production only goes to the main. You cannot deploy from develop branch to the production or to the staging. But also for the feature for branch, because we also wanted to keep that for development purpose, so we deploy, or we use this feature branch, develop branch, main branch to deploy to the dev. But again, as you progress to the higher environment, your scope also changes, right? And that's also one of the best practices that we use. Okay, now showing this approval gate, definitely it's a bit easy. We already implemented in the pipeline. So for that, you see that, let me go and show the pipeline. Yeah. Okay, so you see here we are creating the environment name like application test, application dev, and application staging. And that when you go to the environment here, and here you see the dev X, dev production, staging, and test. For production, I just added the approval checks. So similarly, you can also do setup for your own. You can go to the environment, go to the approval checks, and from here you can add the approvals. And also you have the advanced setting where you can also uncheck or check that. But for a enterprise standard, you should not allow approver to approve their own runs. This is not recommended. Now coming back to the site. So this is the real world implementation challenges solution we have. So definitely first challenge, we had to make sure that we follow the naming convention that you can also see in a module that I'll also show you right now. So definitely, because everybody's or the application will use the common module, so we need to restrict that in that part itself. So I will also show you now how the naming convention is kind of enforced. Now if you go to the infrastructure and then go to the modules, and let's go to the function app, the function app bicep, you see we are providing this naming convention. So you provide the app name, environment, suffix, and we create the function name based on the naming convention. And for the naming convention also, you see there is a type of the resource, then there is an app name, like for application X it's application X, for application Y it will get replaced with that. And then again, environment is like whether it's a dev, test, or UAT, or production. Similarly for app service plan and storage account and application insight. So this we have defined already in the module, and you can also follow the same way. Okay, now coming to the environment isolation. So definitely you should make sure that when you run the pipeline, it should not deploy accidentally to different environments. So only the pipeline of dev should have access to the dev. For test, you should have access to test. So for that, what you can do, you can create a separate service connection for each environment, right? And then those service connection will always deploy to specific resource groups or a subscription. Dedicated resource group with each environment specific permission, yes. So definitely for each resource group, you should have only access to the specific resource group, so that it will only deploy to that, not to others. And also for network isolation, you should have a different CIDR block. That's very common for networking, right? We also use it differently. That you can also show. I can also show you in the pipeline. And environment specific tag for cost tracking and governance. Definitely the tagging is also important, where we wanted to calculate the cost. So that's very important. Now let me show you how the service connection that I created that can deploy for dev, production, staging, and test. Now if I go to the project setting, and then when I go to the service connection, here you see for dev I created a dev, for production, staging, test. For you, if you want to create, definitely it's easy. Just you need to go to new service connection, select the resource group, resources, minimize it, and you go to next, and then you can select the identity type if you want to create different registration based on the federated one. So I use the managed identity one, so because I wanted to use the federated one. And with that, you can always see here, you can just select the resource group which you wanted to use, and then you need to select the scope, okay, which resource group you wanted to pick it up, okay, and then you just need to create. So you need to make sure that I'm not going to go in detail how you create a service connection, but again, for each environment you should have a separate service connection. That's pretty standard, so that only that pipeline can deploy to the dev, production, staging, and test. And how it is been referenced in our pipeline, that I will show you now. So if I go to the repo and go to the pipeline, so this is the master infra, and you see this is Azure subscription. So since it is deploying to the dev, I'm picking this service connection dev. For test, I'm using the test. For staging, I am using the staging, and for production, I'm using production. So similarly, you can create your service connection and you can put that detail in this Azure subscription one. Okay, now going back to this here. Okay, now production safety. So production safety, like nothing but like approval gate. If you wanted to really deploy, you need to make sure that there is approval gate before deploying to the production. There will be some team members, maybe your product manager should get access for approval, so he knows when there is a production deployment, and once he approves, then only it will go and deployment, and that I will already show to you. Now coming to the configuration management, as I said again, for each environment you have already a parameter.json file which is specific to the dev. For dev, you see there is a parameter.json. For prod, you have a parameter.json. Similarly for staging and test, and you can utilize that because again, definitely for different environment you can have a different value, like maybe you have a configuration file, you have configuration values, those things you can put it in the parameter.json. I did not create a very extensive .json file. It's just simple, but the whole idea is this parameter.json file to make sure that you already all your variable value keeps in there. And also one of the advantage of using this instead of using the pipeline variable, because if you have your code or your variable information in the parameter.json file, it is easy to version control. Like if somebody changes, you will know, right? Because definitely whenever anybody changes anything, that you know. But again, in the pipeline variable, if somebody changed, you don't know. Although maybe you know somebody changed and then there is something happen on production, then you are not aware. But when there is a change in the code, because definitely when it goes to the main branch, it goes to the pull request, and you will be knowing after the pull request sent for a review. Okay, so that's very important. Now these are like results and benefit achieved with this approach, because definitely I implemented for this our enterprise application, dev deployment, full pipeline, zero manual intervention, because we wanted to make sure that all the changes to the infrastructure goes through the pipeline. And yeah, this helped a lot, because you just need to set up one at one place, like assume for dev, and then you need to just make sure that the changes goes through dev and test and production. But again, it's just a variable change that you need to do, and then it will go along. Definitely for consistency and reliability, it's important, because you know that for dev, whatever you define, it goes to dev, and then definitely for test, UAT, and production. So you will also have in control. Yeah. Now with respect to since it is also have the validation in place, so you also know to prevent any configuration drift, there is a validation. You do PR review and everything through the code, and with that you can identify. Also with respect to the environment specific, as I said again, you will see this is which I have already showed here. You have a parameter, And then you have this pipeline template example where you can see you're putting all those pipeline template examples, right? Like for the subscription that I showed to you. Okay, so what we learn with this approach, we start with the clear naming convention. That's very important. We use the modular bicep template for dev for that from the day one, and it goes from dev, test, UAT, and production accordingly. We also have the implemented approval gates, separate parameter for per file or per environment, and we also tagged everything consistently so that it is easy to track. So what you should avoid when while you are building, so what we did also to not to do, we don't copy paste the template, because yeah, it's what template, it can be used for maybe one application, multiple application. You just need to create those the dev, test, and environment variable and folder. Don't skip any validation, don't use same service connection for all environment, don't deploy it to production without approval, don't ignore monitoring and alerting. Although I haven't explained, but yeah, we did implement also monitoring and alert for that. Okay, so what next? So there are some of the future enhancements that we had to do. One, like we didn't implement the automated test, that can be also part of the bicep template, because right now we are deploying the infrastructure, but yeah, there's no testing that we are doing. Cost monitoring for environment, we haven't implemented that. For also infrastructure drift, this is something that we wanted to implement. Yeah, so these are some of the improvement that I thought to keep also add it here, so that when you are also working on your infrastructure, you can also keep in mind, and then you can implement based on your need and then your capacity. Okay, so at the end result, we had the infrastructure as a not a code, as a product, because yeah, this whole bicep framework that you can utilize. That's pretty simple now. So definitely all the core related whatever I discussed, it's here in the infrastructure and source. Yeah, you can always see here. You can go here, go to the infrastructure, you can pick the code, and then you can okay, so now we have this bicep framework. Let's try to do some change and then deploy and see whether it's working well or not, right? So we will give the demo for two scenarios. The first scenario is assume that you have this framework and you want to add a new environment, like maybe fourth I've already added, but for a demo, maybe we wanted to add a performance environment. In this case, how you do, what are the changes that you need to do, we will do step by step. And the second scenario, what we'll do, assume that if there is a new application comes, then how you onboard in this framework. So that I'll also show. So let's get started. Okay, so first you need to go to the GitHub repo, because that's how our base code is, right? I'll go here and I'll download the code. Okay, so I have downloaded the code, but it has everything. So I'll just go and grab the bicep framework. So I'll just copy this, because that's what we wanted to implement, right? Now I will close this, and I will create a folder here, the bicep demo. Now I will paste here. Okay, so now we got our basic code, one for application X module and the pipelines. So now let me go back to the bicep framework here. Yeah, and I'll create a new repository, right, for demo. So I'll just create a new repo, demo bicep framework. Okay, and now I will clone that so that I can upload the code, because the code which we picked it up from the GitHub. I'll go here and then I'll run the CMD from here, and then I say git clone, paste it here. Okay, so now I see right now it has nothing, so I will just try to copy paste from here. The infrastructure should be fine, and I'll paste it here. Okay, so now I'll just try to push the code, git add dot, okay, cd demo, git add dot git commit and basic setup git push. Okay, so you can just follow the same way, right? Now if I go to the new repo, now here if you see, yeah, my infrastructure is ready. Now under that I have the application X, yeah, under that we have a module and then pipeline. So as I said, the first scenario what we need to do, we need to create a new environment, right? So for that, what I need to just go ahead and do, step one, yes, I need to definitely create a folder, and yeah, definitely need to change few things. So let me review that. Yeah, okay, so I just opened the full Visual Studio Code, right? Here you can see I have application X and then dev, prod, staging and test. So I just need to create another folder. Like let's take an example, we are going to add it for the performance, right? So the perf, so I'll just create the perf folder, and then just I'll try to copy paste the existing from the main, sorry, from the dev environment. So I'll paste it here. Okay, so now we have some of the value that we need to change. The first is like definitely our environment is no longer is dev, so it's a perf performance. And yeah, you see there are some of the VNet range that you need to do, that you need to change. So you need to understand, okay, what needs to be changed. Like if there is a variable that needs to be updated, for sure, so that needs to be changed. Now app name and everything that remains same, because we are not changing the application, we are just changing the environment. So environment that we updated, and I think the VNet address range we need to change because it's currently pointing to the dev one. So let me go and check from the production what was the last one. So it is a 10.3.16, yeah. So I think we need to go with the fourth. So let me go here, parameter main.js. So it's 4, and then we need to go with the 4. So networking is very important, right? So it's because you are going to create a new VNet, and it should be not overlapping with the existing one, so that you need to change. And NSG, I think it's not required to change anything. Function app, SKU, let's keep it as a Y1 itself. So yeah, I think that's all with this. Let's go to the parameter.json file, and here also have the dev. So we'll just update to the perf. Okay, so that's all. So apart from this, assume that for the performance environment, if any specific changes that required in from your application team, they say that okay, in performance environment we need additional resources and all. If that is needed, then you just need to add another. But assume that if you just wanted to create a similar what you have in the dev test UAT, just copy paste and then update the required variable that we just updated, and then you need to update it. Then you need to kind of make the change. Now with this, I will merge the change first. Let me go to the terminal. Okay, so git add, git commit. Okay, I think we need to also make update in the pipeline, because we did update the Bicep framework in the application X. In the module we don't need to change anything, but in the pipeline we need to make change. So if you see here, We have a dev, test, staging, production, right? Now we need to add another environment here, right? So in this case, maybe, and that you need to also see the order where you want it to add. Let's take example, we need to do performance deployment after test. So what I'll do, I'll just copy paste here the test one, and I'll say here perf, right, perf, and then it should be on the test, perf, and then this is perf, and this is and it depends on the test, right, because it is after test. Okay, so this is the second thing. So first we update the new environment folder, and after that we need to include that in our pipeline. Okay, so let's go back here. The other thing is we need to make sure that this resource group exists, right? So on the environment, and also this service connection. So since for dev, test, and UAT, so dev, test, staging, and production I already created, but for the performance I need to create the service connection. Okay, now let me go back to the project settings. So and here I'm at the service connection. So now here see we don't have this service connection, so we need to create that. And to create that, we, since I use there are a lot of different way, but I use the federated one, so I will just go ahead and create according to that. So for that I need to log into the portal first to create a managed identity for perf. This is a managed identity application X that I created. So for creating the service connection, since I use the managed identity federated, I need to create another managed identity. So I'll just go to the identity, user assigned. So I'll give this name dev, then instead of that perf. So now this user assigned identity, it will get created for the performance environment. And the next thing I need to create the resource group so that I can assign the service principal access to the resource group, so that when it deploys, it will deploy to that specific resource group itself. So here I will just try to copy this, and I'll create the resource group, and in this case it is perf. Okay, so now we are almost ready to create our service connection for the performance environment. Now let's go back here, add a new service connection. I think I need to minimize it. Okay, I will go to the next, and here I will select the manage identity, and this is the resource group we have, and under that we have this perf manage identity that we are going to use, and then we'll select the perf, so that the service connection will only deploy to the perf resource group. And then I'll give the name as MSC, similar to what I had, application X, and then perf. Okay, I will just save it. So while saving this, what it does, it creates this federated service principal, and then it will add also the access to the resource group, so that it can deploy to the respective resource groups that we just given in the service connection. So now let me, I think we already pushed the code. No, I think we have here, and I think this name also matches with the what we created. So let me add git add dot. Okay, so now it would output the code. And now you see we have this. Now next is like you need to create the pipeline, because the older one, it is pointing to the older one. So I'll go here and create the demo pipeline again from the demo folder. I need to continue, and then I'll just say run. Okay, so it's deploying to dev, test, and then performance, and after that staging to production. So this is why it is showing, because I think we had a depends on, where it will deploy to performance and then also to staging, but to production it only goes through this. But we can also put in a such a way that it deploy to dev, test, performance, then staging, then production. So I will fix that, but let it run. Okay, I'll pause the video until it finishes. Okay, I see we need to give a permission because this is the first time we are running. Yeah, okay, so permission is granted. So now with this it will first deploy to the dev, test. Now we have a performance environment also, and staging and production. So this is how you set up when there is a new environment gets added. And assume that if tomorrow they are saying we no longer need this performance environment, then you just need to come here, right, in the repo, yeah, and you just need to remove this, right, this folder you need to remove, and you need to remove the pipeline under that, whatever the section we have for performance. So that's very easy, right? Okay, so it is deployed to the dev. Let's go to the dev and see what we have. So for that you need to go to the dev resource group by type, and then we have a dev, and you see the resources has been created. Now in the performance, since it has nothing, right, so but again it will create the function app, it will create the storage account, let the pipeline finish, right? So it's running for test at the moment. Okay, it's completed for the test and waiting for performance. I'll just approve it. So this is the only one time we need to do. So assume that when you create a pipeline, it asks for the permission, but second time when you run, it will not do the same, right? I'll again pause the video. Okay, so the performance deployment is completed. Let's go and refresh this page so that we see if anything is deployed. Okay, perfect. Now you see we have this vnet created, the function app, and the nsg created, whatever we defined in the main.tf. Okay, perfect. Let's wait for the deployment to complete for staging as well. And I'll also show you how we added the permission, the approval gate for the production environment deployment. Okay, so now for production, since we added the approval, right, so if you see here, it's not running the deployment because we added the approval gate here, right? So if I go to the review and then see, it is asking, right, to review this deployment. So assume that if whatever the approver you have in your case, they will get this kind of notification and they need to either approve or reject, right? So there is also they have approved, defer the approval. So in this case I'll just approve it. Yes, go ahead, and then approve. So once I do approval, then only it will trigger the deployment to the production. So now it started deploying to the production. So now you see all the deployment is completed now, and all of the resources that we wanted to deploy, it's already in here. So in this demo, what we learned, how to add a new environment, because I already created for dev. So you can just again go to the repo, use it, and then you create first. You need to update. You need to just add a new folder, right? You need to add a new folder like perf, and then you need to add a main.bicep and parameter, and according to the environment you need to update those value. This is the first change. Second is we need to add also in a pipeline because we are adding a new stage. So this is how I added. And in this also we have this resource group and service connection. So the service connection must be created and also the resource group, so that whenever you create a service connection, it applies the right approval. So first, yes, you need to create a folder. Second, you need to update the pipeline. And third, you need to create the service connection. With that, if you want to add a new environment, yeah, you will update in this Bicep framework. Now coming to the second scenario. The second scenario what we had, we need to add a new application. Now coming to the second scenario. In the second scenario, what we need to do, we need to add a new application. So for that, what you need to do, you need to create a folder. First of all, like application X we have, similar to that, you can create an application Y. And under that, assume that you have a 4 environment needed. You need to create a folder and you need to just use the same what we have in the application X. Once you created the folder and updated the variables, because this variable is also important, what are the name of the app you wanted to give, right? And if it is needed to create another resources, like apart from the function app or the storage account, if you want to APIM, so you need to update the module. And then you need to make sure that from the main.bicep, whatever the environment you wanted to create, you update according to what we have in the application X. So you can just take the example of application X and you create another folder. So that's the first thing. Second, you need to create a pipeline. Second, you need to update the module, because definitely if you have a new resources to be created, you need to update the module. And third, you need to update the pipeline. So you need to maybe create a new pipeline. So you create a application Y folder here, and under that you have a master infra and then the template. And in that you just need to use the same way how I have created. Okay. Definitely when you create the pipeline, so you will be creating a pipeline, and then you need to also create the service connection, because service connection is important. Now since we are going to create a new application, there will be a new resource group, and you don't want to use the existing service connection. So for that you need to go to the service connection, and the way I also given in a demo, you can also create. So like assume that it's for application X, maybe for MSC, application Y, dev, performance, production, staging, and test. Okay, so at least you know now what are the changes that you need to do. Okay, first you create a folder, update the environment folders. Second, if there is a new modules to be created, then you can add it here. And the third, you need to create a pipeline, and then you need to create the service connection. So you give a try, and while setting up, if you have any question or query, you can write in a comment box. I'll be happy to help. So in today's tutorial, we learn how to create scalable multi-environment infrastructure using Bicep that can support multiple environment and multiple application for enterprise grade application. In also our demo, we learn 2 scenarios. First, assume that if you have the framework and if you want to add a new environment, how you do. And the second scenario we discussed, if you want to add a new application, how you do that. I hope this video will be helpful. And if you have any question or concern while setting up your infrastructure, let me know in the comment box. So thank you and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.